everybody, it's Dr. Chris, orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician, and today I'm going to talk about the extreme yoga girl who fell from her balcony. Welcome to my channel where I make orthopedics and sports medicine easy for you to understand. So I recently did a video on parkour and free running fails. If you haven't watched that now, I'll leave a link down below in the description. And when I was reading through the comments, one of the viewers left the following question. Gerald Leal asked, "Great video, do the extreme yoga girl who fell. How did she survive that height? What did she break?" The extreme yoga girl is a 23-year-old female who lives in Mexico. Her Instagram profile shows numerous pics of her bungee jumping, skydiving, and performing acts of extreme yoga. This past week, while performing an extreme yoga pose, she fell off the balcony and fell to the ground approximately 80 feet below. Remarkably, she survived this fall. She was rescued by first responders who took her to a nearby hospital where she underwent 11 hours of surgery. That's a lot of surgery. After surgery, she was taken to the intensive care unit where she's being kept in an induced coma and currently listed in critical condition. She suffered fractures to 110 bones.
What?
That's correct, 110 of her 206 bones. The list of bones that were fractured includes both feet, both ankles, both legs, both knees, both hips, both arms, and her head. She also suffered extensive injuries to her face. And the reconstruction of both legs is expected to take up to 3 years. So the first question that Jero asked was, how could she survive that fall? The distance that she fell was approximately 80 feet. I looked up a number of studies that talked about falls from heights, and here's some of the information that I found out. The average height for a lethal fall is typically around 39 feet. And generally, falls from higher than 25 feet present with a decreased level of consciousness and a higher injury severity score. That generally means that they're more likely to be unconscious and they are more likely to be really messed up. Obviously, the people who fall from a higher height are more likely to die, with the leading cause of injury being brain injury. And in fact, more than 50% of the people who die from these falls have open skull fractures. Usually these people have their brains outside of their skull, and that's usually a bad thing. In falls over 10 meters, or 33 feet, injuries of the neck were extremely common. And with falls over 25 meters, or approximately 80 feet, head injuries were extremely common with an incidence of over 90%. So basically, if you fall from a height of 75 to 80 feet, your head is getting messed up 9 times out of 10. In a NASA study that looked at the ability of the human body to withstand sudden accelerations, they found that the body was best able to tolerate an impact with the ground if it was a feet first landing. Interestingly enough, the body was least able to tolerate an impact with the ground if it landed in a prone or face down position or on its side, which is kind of odd actually, because you'd think it would be the most lethal if you landed directly on your head. Another study showed that people who fell from heights of less than 10 meters or 33 feet were more likely to land on their head, whereas those who fell from heights between 10 and 25 meters were more likely to land on their feet. So to answer Jero's first question, while it's usually unlikely that somebody would survive a fall from a height this high, her legs were able to absorb most of the force so that there was less energy available to damage the internal organs held inside of her torso. Thank you, legs. If you're wondering, just like me, how much force that was, well, thankfully I was able to check that out using a calculator I found on the internet. We know that the height that she fell from was approximately 80 feet, and if we assume that her weight was approximately 55 kilos, the average weight of a woman, or in other words, approximately 121 pounds, then the overall time from the moment that she fell to the time that she impacted the ground was approximately 2.21 seconds. Her speed when she hit the ground was approximately 21.69 meters per second, or 71.16 feet per second. That's pretty quick. The amount of energy that was expended when she struck the ground at that speed was 12,936 joules of energy, or 12.9 kilojoules. A lot. Fortunately for Alexa, Her feet first landing allowed most of this energy to be dissipated, allowing her to survive her impact from 80 feet. My official medical position on this is do not try this at home. You are unlikely to survive. Jero's second question was, what bones did she break? Many of the sources disagreed on exactly what had transpired. Several articles stated that she had broken somewhere between 100 to 110 bones, which is almost half of the 206 bones that she has. That is definitely what we would call a polytrauma. Her injury severity score, which is a measure that we use to detail the severity of injuries when somebody presents with polytrauma, would certainly be off the chart. But as I stated before, the likely tally of lower extremity injuries included fractures of both ankles, fractures of both feet, fractures of both legs, fractures of both knees, fractures of both hips, fractures of both arms, fractures of her face.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
From this list of injuries, we can see that most of these injuries have occurred in the bones of the lower extremity. And this is kind of what we would expect, given the fact that she actually survived a fall from this height. Now, each of the feet has 26 bones, the largest of which is the calcaneus, or the heel bone. So we would expect that when she struck the ground, the heel bone would take the brunt of her impact. And of course that makes sense because the calcaneus lines up directly beneath the tibia with the talus in between. This then means that the ankle is the next thing that is most likely to be pulverized to dust as the next stage of this process. As the tibia above is the next thing to stop moving, it is most likely to be impacted by the end of the femur or thigh bone as it continues towards the ground. So that makes the tibial plateau, or the top of the tibia, the next thing most likely to be injured. Her injuries at the knee may also include fractures of the femoral condyles, or the bottom part of the femur, as they crush into the tibial plateaus. As the force travels up the leg, I would expect the femurs themselves to be the next thing injured. If they were not, then the next thing further up the chain is the pelvis itself. And just as with the knee, we could expect the top of the femur, or the femoral head, to behave like nutcrackers in the pelvis. And we could expect the pelvis to be fractured at the point where they join with the femurs. Due to the speed of her impact, it is likely that she crumpled up like an accordion when she struck the ground. And therefore, we would expect both arms to be injured as she fell forward into the ground. The last thing to impact would be her face and her head. And fortunately, much of the force of impact would have been dissipated by that time. Oddly, there are two injuries that I did expect that I didn't hear anything about in any of the news reports. The first type of injury are fractures of the spine and the associated spinal cord injuries. None of the media reports listed spinal fractures or spinal cord injuries as part of the injury total that she suffered. I find this odd because spinal cord injuries are typically associated with falls from height. And it is not uncommon for patients who survive these falls to end up with some sort of paralysis or a neurologic injury. And this just means that either their legs don't work, their arms and legs don't work, or that they have some sort of loss of neurologic function. The other injury that I'm surprised that I didn't see, given the height from which she fell, is a dissociation of her pelvis from her spine. That does happen, that's a thing. In falls from a height, where there is a significant amount of axial loading, meaning force directly in line with the spine, upon impact, it is possible for the ligaments around the base of the spine, or the sacrum, to become unattached or torn, separating the spine itself from the pelvis by shear force. That's correct, the spine can actually be sheared off of the pelvis. Because she fell from such a height and she landed on her feet, I'm really surprised that this was not one of the injuries that she suffered. And of course, being an orthopedic surgeon, this is only the orthopedic injuries that she suffered. This does not speak in any way to the numerous internal injuries that she is likely to have suffered as a result of this fall. I'll leave that for a general surgeon or one of the other specialties to cover. But suffice it to say that she probably had a lot of internal injuries and a lot of internal bleeding. This is an extremely devastating injury, and it's going to take a really, really, really long time for her to rehabilitate after this injury. And there is a high likelihood that she will not be functioning at the level that she was prior to this injury after she has completed her rehabilitation. There is a real possibility that her rehabilitation may never be complete. This may be something that she needs to continue rehabilitating for the rest of her life. And I'm not for or against extreme yoga or any other type of thrill-seeking behavior. But I can say that it is unfortunate that all of this happened from her desire to perform these maneuvers on the guardrail of her balcony. There are safer ways to practice yoga, but then again, I guess that's the point. So there you have it. Today I've been discussing the extreme yoga girl who fell from her balcony. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up and share it with somebody that you know. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho.